Welcome to the Old Mac Gang podcast, the show where longtime Mac and Apple users share practical tips and stories for age-seasoned Apple fans. I'm Marty Gensius, joined by Chris, Charlie, Bob, and Peter, our panel of classic Apple users. Today's episode, we're going to talk about classic card and board games on the iPad and the iPhone, sort of rediscovering some of the fun stuff that we did with classic board games, like Solitaire, chess, Scrabble, with the added polish of being able to do it on tech. And I think this is a missing piece for a lot of folks who are seasoned, aged users. The idea that you have a device here where you can play some pretty fun and remarkable games if you like to do that. So let's find out who's with us tonight.
Hey, I'm Chris. I'm a 78-year-old retiree here in Tucson, Arizona, and been a member of the Tucson Mac User Group, and in the old days, the Dallas Apple Corps and the Mac Pack in Richardson, Texas, and the Capital Macintosh Group in Austin. So worked for Apple for a while, did some university IT. Now I'm retired. Got a new Apple Watch Series 11 that I'm really enjoying. And what else? Let's see. And I've got a 16 Pro Max iPhone and an M1 Mac Mini and all of the rest.
Hi, I'm Charlie in North Houston. Using the Mac since the early days. Actually had access to a Lisa for a while. And I have a MacBook M1 right now, thinking about an M5. I have a Series 10 watch, and I recently got some AirPod 4s, because I lost my other ones. And I wish I'd gone the AirPod route before, AirPod, because they're just fantastic, and they have all these great features that work with the Apple products. So anyway, that's it.
Hi, I'm Bob, also in Tucson. I've been a Mac user since the early 90s and active in Macintosh user groups here in Tucson and in Milwaukee prior to that. And I am still in my 7th decade.
Hi, I'm Peter. I'm a 73-year-old now, moving on up, age-seasoned Apple enthusiast from Bay Village, Ohio. I like to learn about all things Apple and enjoy sharing what I've learned with others. I love sharing with this old Mac gang and with all of our listeners.
So to start, to see if there's any news, one of the things I picked up on today, if you are looking for some free quality software, Affinity, which has basically a graphical, a photo editor and all sorts of sort of graphic editor software with it. Affinity was bought by Canva. And Canva is great for titles and developing photos and things or developing designs. For example, the design that we see with Old Mac Gang was actually developed through Canva. And also, so there's some wonderful things that you can do with Canva. Well, Canva bought Affinity Studio, and they have the Affinity Studio suite for free. You can download it now for free. I think what they're trying to do is use that really good software to be able to draw people into getting a paid Canva account. And a paid Canva account has some benefits to it. It also has AI integration with it if you want to use that. But nonetheless, you can still get the Affinity Studio for free. Just go to affinity.studio and it'll take you to a link where you can download it for either Mac or Windows. Really good software. It's sort of a professional competitor for Photoshop, and I think it will draw people to that product and draw people to Canva. Any other news that folks want to mention?
Well, Adobe had their big annual Max conference this past Tuesday and Wednesday, and I think probably everybody who's interested was probably there or has seen it. Um, Basically, they did some interesting software updates for the photographic products that I use, the various flavors of Lightroom and Photoshop, that further leverage their AI efforts. And will there's some interesting new directions like helping cull photos and stuff like that that we've been asking for a long time. It still won't handle things like bird shoots because it's only humans so far that it will help with the culling with. But still, it's a very interesting direction that they're going in.
With it, that's good to hear about Adobe, and any other things that come up during the week we'll kind of highlight at the beginning of the show as we can. So we're going to talk about card games and board games and how you can play them with your iPad or with your phone, and games that we've tried or games that we've used. We're going to have some information built into the show notes, suggestions on card games to try like Solitaire or Hearts or Spades or Gin Rummy. The beauty of this, and I think the beauty of also board games that you can get on there like Scrabble, chess, Monopoly, those types of games that are available for you to play on your iPad, is you can do it by yourself. You can play the game against yourself. You don't have to have a group of people. I've got nothing against having people over to do these things, but sometimes you just want some quiet reflecting time and some fun time that you can do that. So that's some consideration that make these games kind of unique now that you can play them on your devices. We'll have some useful resources, including URLs to the Apple Store, the arcade overview of what you can get with Apple Arcade, and then some links to some of the games that we talk about tonight. So let's kind of start out with this question, and it's the first question to the panel. Are you a gamer? Bob.
Well, I'm not what one would call a hardcore gamer, as in Warcraft, Fortnite, SimCity, if you remember that, uh, or any of those games that take many hours or even days to play. Today, I like single player games that will provide me with what I call a brain break for 3 to 5 minutes. Games like Minesweeper or Solitaire. They take a few minutes, and then I can get back to what I was doing with a clearer mind and conscience. Also, they're good for when you're waiting in line um, at a bank, a grocery store, or waiting for your plane to board or waiting for your bags to hit the carousel. So I like those short games that I can play a little bit and then stop and put my attention elsewhere.
Am I a gamer? Not really, with a few exceptions. I have always enjoyed Tetris. So, not counting teletype and computers that took decks of cards, during my earliest computer explorations, I always enjoyed playing Tetris, and probably a little too much for my health. And I still do, but moderately and on rare occasions. But I have to admit, my motto at the time was, if it doesn't run Tetris, it's not a computer. The other action game, I guess I would call it an action game in that it has some reflexes to it that I obsessed over for a little while, several months at least, was Bejeweled. Uh, Both of these two games, Tetris and Bejeweled, and their offshoots, knockoffs, and Rococo variants are available in games on Apple devices and just about everywhere else you can look for games. Uh, I have more recently dabbled with Minecraft and Roblox, but the enthusiasm in those really came from beloved students who assured me that they were immense fun, and I had no intrinsic enthusiasm for them.
need to unmute.
You're
Um,
good.
I don't play games very much on my devices. I was a big terminal gaming company group, NetHack and Zach and Zork being the some of the original I don't know what you call them, adventure games. Um, and I occasionally I flip into Solitaire or something. Although I'm very fascinated by the quality of the graphics and the media that's in video games these days. But I'm not really tempted to do it, partially because of cost, because I imagine if I get into it, it'll cost a fair amount. And time wise, I have other things I want to do with my time than play games. So anyway,
I'm not really a modern gamer in the sense that my grandson Jan was before he went away to college. Um, but my wife and I own the 75th anniversary Scrabble set, which was fun. We haven't played it very much lately. Gosh, by now there's probably a century edition. I do like playing Mahjong, which has translated well into an online game. My old friend Gerald at Apple used to tell me about his grandfather who could set up the mahjong board, the actual physical board, in 12 different ways for different setups. And I couldn't even imagine setting up the regular board, right, with all those chips. But I find that's a very fun and interesting game. Sometimes I'll play solitaire on a break or something, and thanks to Bob here, I discovered there's a backgammon game in the arcade. And I'm looking forward to trying that out. I used to play with my dad, and it would be fun to sort of fool around with that a little bit. Um, I also found I didn't realize there was a gin rummy game, so I used to enjoy playing that as well as a kid. So that'd be fun. Um, and I think the break value that a couple of us have already highlighted might be kind of an important thing to consider. I don't know about the rest of you all, but I spend a lot of time in front of this screen every day, so much so that my eyes start to blur out by the end of the day. But I also spend a lot of time on Duolingo. I'm averaging about 40 to an hour and 10 minutes a day, depending on the day, a couple of different languages, and I find that to be a lot of fun. But getting a break from all of that, getting away from the big screen, I think there's a value add there. Marty?
Yeah, I am I a gamer? Well, I grew up in a generation where gaming was I'm a little younger than you guys, but not too much. But gaming was, had just kind of come of age. So I think my first gaming unit that I got, well, I first started playing games when I was in college on the system that they had on campus at the University of Illinois. And it was a touch screen kind of situation where you interrupted the light pathway through to select things. And they did some pretty remarkable educational games through that. And that got me interested. When Atari came out, I got an Atari 2600 with bunches of cartridges that I would just buy and not use them too much. When I had a computer, I started playing Wolfenstein, which was just kind of a fine distraction. And I don't know if you know Castle Wolfenstein, where you're moving through the castle and you're killing Nazis, I think, and trying to find gold and rescue things. I have a low tolerance with games for not being successful. So some of the new complicated storylines where you have to do things, particularly if they require you to do multiple button clicks at the same time, and that dexterity that you have to have. If I have to jump to the top of a tower and I've failed 4 or 5 times, I'm kind of done with the game. So I need to find kind of low benchmark games. And for me, that right now, that means I'm fascinated by backgammon because I used to be a mean backgammon player. And to be able to play it against a machine instead of against a person, because I don't always have that person around. But backgammon also can take some time. So the thing I'm doing now, probably most, and I don't know if this constitutes a board game, but crossword puzzles, and particularly the New York Times minis. The New York Times mini crosswords are, and I'll talk more about it in our next question, or in questions to come. It is great because it takes about 3 or 4 minutes, and that's what I have. I will play them when I wake up in the morning to kind of get my head going, and I'll play them before I go to bed at night. I'll play them when I'm waiting somewhere and have to wait and don't have any other devices but my phone to work with. So I've purchased extra packs because you get one a day with the New York Times, and that sometimes doesn't feed my need for gaming. But that, and then occasionally Jeopardy, which is kind of fun to play on your phone too, in terms of testing memory and testing history and knowledge that you have. So that's sort of my level of gaming. I think the other thing is physics games. So there is a game called right now What the Golf, which is essentially a golfing game, but it has all sorts of physics responses in the environment. So games where you do a particular action and the environment has a reaction back which alters the game, for me is kind of fun. They used to have one called like Ragdoll Cannon, where you'd shoot rag dolls at things, but you'd have to deal with the physics of shooting a rag doll. But yeah, for me, it's the low tolerance for not being successful that kills me in my kind of game pursuit. So I kind of stick with safe ones that I can feel some efficacy in doing what I'm doing. Next question is, what classic card or board game first hooked you on gaming? And have you found a version of it on an iPad or iPhone?
Well, as far as pre-computer goes, I was interested in a variety of games. For example, Solitaire is a one-player game, Cribbage is a two-player game, Gin is multiple players, Poker with friends for nickels. Board games, Monopoly, Trivial Pursuit, Shutbox, Mexican Train Dominoes. Currently, digitally, on iOS, I like Dots, Solitaire, Sudoku, Monument Valley, but Monument Valley, I run into that same thing that Marty has, a low tolerance for getting stuck and not finishing it. On Mac OS, I have Minesweeper, Solitaire, and Backgammon. And Marty, sometime we might have to play a backgammon game in person. How about you, Peter?
When I was a kid, card games and board games, that was it. I mean, we did it with, well, there were no computers, so we did it with tokens and cards and stuff like that. The classic card games that I played in high school and college were a few: Michigan Poker, Sheep's Head, and a game called Five Man Yam. The attractive features of all three were that they have elaborate rules that are difficult to remember and hard to execute, which meant that in a pinch, a good player might convince others of a rule they had forgotten and end up winning. So I liked all three of those. I've spotted the first two online, but Five Man Yam may just be an apocryphal acquired taste. Maybe it's out there in some deep corner of the dark web. I don't know. I didn't go there. As far as board games, the two I played a lot in the late 60s and early 70s were Risk and Diplomacy. And I couldn't really envision either in today's online world, but I looked around and prepped for this meeting, and they're out there. I mean, everywhere I look, they're out there on every device, on Steam, on different gaming platforms. And so you can play them now. If you can't get a gang together like we did, You can play against remote opponents. You can play against AI and so on. Who knew?
Yeah. Let's see. Hold on. I just got to get my notes here. Okay. Um, Solitaire was my first. Of course, that's everybody's. I would say I used to do live bridge. I used to be really into bridge. I haven't tracked down the online equivalents yet. Um, I also am interested in online chess. And like Peter, I was a big Risk fan. As a matter of fact, when I graduated from college, I overslept my graduation, and I was late to my own graduation because I was conquering the world, which I thought was fun. Anyway, but there is an online equivalent for it on Steam.
Well, I've kind of already mentioned my favorites, um, but in sort of in line with the way I think it with crossword puzzles, Duolingo is my big vice, and I started out about 4 years ago and thought, let me try this out with my Spanish studies, and it really has been a lot of fun. As the co-founder Luis Von said, his job was to make your vegetables taste like dessert. And there is about as much gaming in Duolingo as you want to have. Some people get kind of annoyed with it after a while because they're more academic. But, and I switch back and forth between Spanish and French and a little bit of Russian. And I find it to be a lot of fun. And it's also interesting to see how these languages have changed in the past 60 years since I was in grad school. It's quite extraordinary. But yeah, so that would probably be my thoughts, Marty.
Yeah, I was looking at a couple of games. One in particular, when I was in college, I spent many an evenings sitting in Ed's room playing Mealborn, and the card game, the classic kind of card game. What's a French card game about, getting 100 kilometers or moving towards 100 kilometers. And there are app versions of that too. So, and app versions where I think you can play against computer opponents if you want to do that. So Mealborn would have been one game that kind of got me hooked. And I guess sort of like Charlie's Risk behavior or the Risk thing, we would lose hours just playing Mealborn in Ed's room. There were a couple of games that are mentioned here, or one game in particular, Monument Valley. I don't think there was ever a board or, card version of this. It is a fantastic game for your phone, and it has sort of you have to kind of put together a path to have this person move through the path through this Monument Valley. And it has a little bit of physics. It has a little bit of you kind of have to look at the angles and look at the perspectives of it to move people through that pathway. But you can also do it in bits and pieces. So you can start and stop that game anytime you want to. But Monument Valley is a favorite of mine. And another one that was not part of a board game or another card game of sort. There's a game, and there's a whole series of these called The Room. And it's basically a puzzle game where you have to, part of it is like you have this box and you have to turn this box around and you have to find keys and things that match up in the box. And then you figure out how to activate those two separate pieces, and then the box opens up to a different configuration. It's a very cool game. And again, it's been built out from just the initial game to a variety of other versions of it. But again, more of a puzzle game that you can play on your phone or on your iPad. It's called The Room, and it is wonderful. Graphics and good kind of mind stimulation for that. Last question for our group. How would you encourage or assist age similar friends to get into gaming on their device?
Well, I would encourage them. Don't be afraid to try some games that you remember from your the before times, and I think some of you have already looked into that. And don't be afraid to look stupid in front of others. Look at me. I'm almost the poster child for looking stupid. You may find that spending some of your intellect playing an easy game gives the deeper part of your brain a chance to work on the issue, the problem, the article that you're trying to write or complete without your higher conscious continually poking that bear and getting and making you stop. So give it a try. There's a lot to do. You can do it on your phone, your iPad, your Mac, on in the Apple ecosystem. There's the gaming there. You can even do that on an Apple TV.
Yep.
So jump in, give it a try.
My advice would be that I think a lot of the games being developed by newspapers are a really good entry point. Traditional old school items like crosswords and Sudoku have morphed into nice online snackable versions now. I am particularly fond of three games available to New York Times subscribers: Wordle, Spelling Bee, and Pips. Pips is a kind of dominoes with some extra constraints. All of them share that they can be played quickly, they produce joy when you succeed, and they can be repeated uh, if you want more. So that's my 2020 on a good way in. I guess I better say Solitaire because it seems like everybody else has said it, and my wife, my sister-in-law, I mean, a lot of people play Solitaire. It hasn't been for me, but it sure sounds like that's the sweet spot.
Let's see. Again, I would say, uh, hold on just a minute. I've got my notes in front of me. Here we go. Um, I'd say word games like Wordle and just straight crossword puzzles. Also, maybe Risk or chess is the way I'd get people interested.
Chris?
Yeah, I would second everything that Bob and Peter have said, and Charlie too. Start with the familiar. If there's something that you played a long time ago, like gin rummy or backgammon or mahjong, and you find it fun. I mean, the idea is to have fun, and this concept of using the brain for something else. Um, One of the big things I found that's really different in retirement, and when people who haven't retired ask me this question, it's usually always the same answer. It's namely that, when I was working, a lot of my, volunteer photography and processing and stuff had to be slotted in 30 minutes here, 30 minutes there, whenever I had time. When you're retired, you get a good idea. You can spend as much time as you want on it, theoretically. And so what ends up happening is sort of the inverse of that. We can spend a lot of time on something, and before you know it, 3 or 4 hours have slipped by. And, that'll lead to a lot of mental fatigue. And it's a good way to take a break. And it's probably very healthy as well. So start with something fun and kind of keep it fun. That's the whole idea. Keep it light, keep it fun. Marty?
Yeah, one of the things that you mentioned was about the potential for scams and online gambling. And, I want to pick up on that a little bit. And what I would support you in thinking is generally, if you're staying within the Apple ecosystem and you're using the Apple Arcade for your games or you're selecting games, you're generally pretty safe with not having to deal with scams or not having to deal with online gambling. the people can get sucked into that. And even some of the things that the ads you see on television of the celebrities who are now playing this game or that game, and it's free. Yeah, but there's a concern about data and where the data is going and sort of what you've put in there. So generally stay safe, stay out of the gambling games, although they are rather addictive. And make sure that you're not pumping money into it. I generally don't like games that require me to buy tokens because it means I'm constantly feeding the monster with more money to continue to play the game. So I kind of like just plain old standalone games. If I have to buy a game, that's good. But if I have to continue to feed it to keep it going, I'll stay away from games like that. My recommendation is start simple. Sort of find out, have that conversation with your friend to find out what kind of games did they like to play off device, and then help them find that same game on device, because I'm pretty sure you can find almost anything in terms of gaming on device where they could play solitaire. I'm not a solitaire player, because many people mentioned it in tonight. For me, it's one of those games that could go on forever, and I sort of need those short little bits of satisfaction. And so my games and the games that I like are more quick. The crossword puzzles that a lot of people have mentioned. I never thought I would do Sudoku, and sure enough, I think it was either New York Times have a Sudoku on it, and it's like, this scares me. I don't quite understand it. So I picked the easiest version of it and then started playing just the easy versions of Sudoku and felt some sense of accomplishment to move on to larger versions of the puzzles. So start simple and build from there. Find out where your friend's passion is or what their good memories are, and introduce them to a game, and maybe even play a game alongside them or with them. So that would be my recommendations for encouraging and assisting age-similar friends to get into sort of online or on-device games, I'd like to say, not online games per se. Any more comments from the group or any more things that we want to talk about? I think this was kind of a challenge because I pulled this topic out not really thinking of my own interests around it, which are minimal, but thinking surely this is something we can all get on board with. And it was fun to watch some of the text messaging going on through the day with the group going, I don't know if I can do that. And it's sort of like, well, when I started writing notes about it, things came up for me. So think about it if you're a listener or a viewer, think about it in terms of your own ability to use these games to relax, hopefully, to kind of keep your mind sharp and mentally focused, and to kind of improve fun points in your life as or if you need it. So anything else from the group? Otherwise, I will thank Bob, Chris, Peter, and Charlie for joining us on the Old Mac Gang. You can email us at the podtalknetwork@gmail.com and drop us a line. Give us some ideas for shows or things that you might be interested in doing. You can visit our website at the podtalk.net, www.thepodtalk.net. And, you find us on YouTube. We're doing this on Thursdays. Generally, it's on Monday. I had a scheduling conflict, so I appreciate that. But you can find us on Wednesday nights, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on YouTube at youtube.com/@OldMacGang. That's our YouTube channel, which has this show and all past shows. So thanks for joining us. And thanks for being part of the Old Mac Gang.